Catherine Morgan clutched her carry-on bag tightly as she navigated the narrow aisle of the Boeing 737. Flight 2418 to Chicago was packed, and she was among the last to board. The overhead bins were already full, forcing her to push her small suitcase under the seat in front. As she settled into her window seat, Catherine pulled out a worn leather wallet from her purse, carefully extracting a small photo of her 6-month-old daughter, Isabel. The baby's bright blue eyes and dimpled smile never failed to calm her nerves before takeoff. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" a deep voice asked. Catherine glanced up to see a tall man in a tailored charcoal suit, gesturing to the empty middle seat beside her. His jawline was sharp, his dark hair flecked with distinguished silver at the temples. There was something vaguely familiar about him. "No, it's free," she replied, quickly returning the photo to her wallet. The man nodded politely and sat down, immediately pulling out his laptop. From the corner of her eye, Catherine noticed the company logo on his screen, Meridian Technologies. Her heart skipped a beat. She had applied for a marketing position at Meridian just last week, desperate for better health insurance for Isabel. The company was known for its generous benefits package, something she desperately needed as a single mother. "Turbulence makes you nervous?" the man asked, noticing her white-knuckled grip on the armrest as the plane began to taxi. "That obvious, huh?" Catherine forced a smile. "I fly a few times a year for work, but I never quite got used to it. I'm practically living on planes these days," he replied with a weary smile. "After a while, you barely notice the bumps." He extended his hand. "I'm James Bennett." The name hit her like a bolt of lightning. James Bennett, CEO of Meridian Technologies. One of the most influential business leaders in the country, and she had just applied to his company. "Catherine Morgan," she managed, shaking his hand. "Nice to meet you." As the plane ascended, Catherine tried to calm her racing thoughts. Should she mention her application? Would it seem opportunistic? The universe had placed her next to one of the few people who could change her and Isabel's life trajectory, yet she hesitated. The last 6 months had been a whirlwind since Isabel's birth, sleepless nights, mounting medical bills, and the painful absence of Michael, who had walked out when she was 7 months pregnant. "So what takes you to Chicago?" James asked, closing his laptop as the flight attendant announced it was safe to use electronic devices. "I'm presenting at the Digital Marketing Summit," Catherine replied, grateful for the distraction. "My agency is showcasing some new campaign strategies." "Impressive," James nodded. "Which agency?" "Reynolds and Walsh. I've been with them for about 3 years now." The conversation flowed easily as they discovered shared professional interests. Catherine found herself relaxing, almost forgetting who she was speaking with. James was insightful and surprisingly down-to-earth, asking thoughtful questions about her work and listening intently to her responses. When the flight attendant arrived with drinks, Catherine reached for her wallet to retrieve her credit card. In her haste, the small photo of Isabel slipped out, fluttering down between their seats. James bent to pick it up before she could react. As he glanced at the image, his entire demeanor changed. The color drained from his face, and his hand trembled slightly. "Your daughter?" he asked, his voice strained. "Yes," Catherine replied, suddenly uncomfortable with his intense reaction. "Isabel? She's 6 months old." James stared at the photo, then at Catherine, his eyes searching her face with an unsettling intensity. "When was she born?" "December 12th, Catherine answered cautiously. "Why do you ask?" James's jaw tightened. "And her father?" Catherine stiffened. "That's rather personal, Mr. Bennett. It's Michael, isn't it? Michael Winters." His voice was barely audible above the plane's engines. The world seemed to tilt beneath Catherine. How could this stranger know Michael's name? She had never mentioned him. "How do you—" "He's my son," James said, his voice hollow with shock. "And this child, she has his eyes. Exactly his eyes." Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. Michael had rarely spoken of his family, claiming only that they were estranged. He had never once mentioned that his father was James Bennett, CEO of Meridian Technologies. "You were never going to tell me?" James asked, still clutching the photo, his expression a complex mixture of hurt, anger, and wonder. "I have a granddaughter, and you were never going to tell me?" Catherine's mind raced. This couldn't be happening. The father of her ex, the man who had abandoned her during pregnancy, was sitting next to her on this random flight, and not just any man, a powerful CEO who now knew about the grandchild he never knew existed. "I didn't know who you were," she whispered. "Michael never told me about his family. He just left." The plane hit a pocket of turbulence, jostling them physically as the emotional turbulence between them intensified. The flight attendant announced they were beginning their descent into Chicago, but Catherine barely heard the words. Her carefully constructed life, the one she had rebuilt for herself and Isabel after Michael's departure, was about to change in ways she couldn't begin to predict. James was still staring at the photo, his fingers tracing the outline of Isabel's face. "She looks just like Michael did at that age," he said softly, a wealth of emotion in his voice. "I have a granddaughter." As the plane began its descent toward Chicago, Catherine realized that this chance encounter was just the beginning of a journey neither of them had expected to take. The question was, where would it lead them? The arrival at O'Hare International Airport was a blur for Catherine. She moved through the terminal in a daze, acutely aware of James Bennett walking beside her, his presence commanding attention from those around them. Neither had spoken much during the plane's descent, both too shocked by the revelation to form coherent thoughts. "We need to talk," James finally said, as they reached the baggage claim area. His voice was calm but firm, leaving no room for refusal. "Are you staying at the conference hotel?" Catherine nodded, clutching her carry-on like a shield. "The Grand Lakeside." "I'm staying there as well," James replied, checking his watch. "I have a meeting I can't reschedule, but I can meet you in the hotel restaurant at 7. Please, Catherine, this isn't a request I make lightly." Something in his tone, perhaps the barely concealed vulnerability, made Catherine agree. 7 o'clock. They parted ways, James disappearing into a waiting town car, while Catherine joined the taxi queue, her mind racing. What did James want? Money? Access to Isabel? Or perhaps to deny any connection at all? Michael had walked away so easily. Perhaps that trait ran in the family. In her hotel room, Catherine paced nervously while on a video call with her best friend Rebecca, who was babysitting Isabel back home. "He's Michael's father," Rebecca exclaimed, adjusting the camera to show Isabel sleeping peacefully in her crib. "And not just any father, the CEO of Meridian Technologies. Kate, this is unreal." "Tell me about it," Catherine sighed, sinking onto the bed. "What am I supposed to do, Becca? I went from being a single mum struggling to make ends meet to sitting across from my daughter's estranged grandfather, who happens to be worth millions." "Does he want to be involved?" Rebecca asked cautiously. "I don't know, that's what tonight's dinner is about, I guess." Catherine glanced at her watch. "I should start getting ready." "Whatever happens, remember that you've been doing this on your own for 6 months. You don't owe him anything," Rebecca reminded her. "But Kate, if he wants to help, maybe consider it. Not for you, but for Isabel." After the call ended, Catherine showered and changed into a simple black dress, professional enough for a business dinner but not so formal as to suggest this was anything but a complicated situation. At precisely 6:55 p.m., she entered the hotel restaurant, immediately spotting James at a corner table away from other diners. "Thank you for coming," he said, standing as she approached. His earlier shock had been replaced by a composed exterior, though tension lingered in the set of his shoulders. After ordering drinks, an uncomfortable silence settled between them. Catherine decided to address the elephant in the room. "I want to be clear about something," she began. "I didn't know who you were on that plane. I had no idea Michael was your son, and I certainly wasn't trying to ambush you with news of a grandchild." James studied her face carefully. "I believe you. What puzzles me is why Michael never told you about his family or why he never told us about you and the baby." Catherine's laugh was bitter. "Michael walked out when I was 7 months pregnant, said he wasn't ready for fatherhood and that it would complicate his future plans. He changed his number, blocked me on social media, and disappeared. The last I heard, he had moved to Seattle." James closed his eyes briefly, pain evident in his expression. "That sounds like Michael, unfortunately, always running from responsibility." He took a sip of his scotch. "My son and I have a complicated relationship. He's been estranged from our family for nearly 3 years now." "He never mentioned that," Catherine said softly. "Michael left after a major disagreement about his future in the company. He wanted immediate control of major divisions without earning the position. When I refused, he claimed I was trying to control his life and cut ties completely. James's voice was measured, but Catherine could hear the underlying hurt. His mother, my ex-wife, occasionally gets text messages, but he's rejected all our attempts at reconciliation. The waiter arrived with their appetizers, providing a momentary reprieve from the heavy conversation. Catherine used the interruption to gather her thoughts. "I'm not looking for anything from you, Mr. Bennett," she said, once they were alone again. "Isabel and I have been managing on our own." "James, please," he corrected gently. "And managing doesn't sound like thriving. Tell me about your situation, Catherine, honestly." Perhaps it was his direct approach, or simply the weight of months of struggle, but Catherine found herself revealing the challenges of single motherhood, the exorbitant cost of childcare in Boston, Isabel's minor heart condition that required regular checkups with specialists, the precarious balancing act of advancing her career while being a present mother. "The position at Meridian," James said, connecting the dots. "That's why you applied. The health benefits." Catherine nodded, embarrassed. "I didn't know the connection to Michael. The position just matched my qualifications, and I had heard about your company's excellent health care plan." "You're qualified regardless of this situation," James said firmly. "Your application was already flagged by HR as a strong candidate." Their main courses arrived, and the conversation shifted slightly. James asked about Isabel, her personality, her milestones, her health. Catherine found herself sharing anecdotes, and even showing more photos on her phone. To her surprise, James seemed genuinely interested, not just politely attentive. "She has the Bennett eyes," James observed, smiling at a video of Isabel attempting to crawl. "My mother had those same eyes, startlingly blue. They skipped me but appeared in Michael." As they finished their meal, James set down his fork with deliberate care. "I'd like to be part of Isabel's life, Catherine. I've missed 6 months already. I don't want to miss any more." The statement hung between them, loaded with implications. Catherine took a deep breath, measuring her response. "I appreciate that, but I need to be cautious. Isabel is my priority, and I won't expose her to people who might disappear from her life on a whim. No offense, but the Bennett men don't have the best track record in that department." Instead of anger, James's face showed respect at her candor. "Fair point." "I'm not Michael, Catherine. When I commit to something or someone, I don't walk away." "Words are easy," Catherine replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "It's actions that matter." "Then let me show you," James countered. "I'm not asking for immediate trust. I'm asking for an opportunity to earn it, for Isabel's sake." Catherine considered his request. She thought about Isabel growing up without extended family, about the support system her daughter deserved. But she also remembered Michael's broken promises, the pain of abandonment. "I'm willing to take small steps," she finally conceded, "but I need something from you first." "Name it," James said without hesitation. "Michael needs to know about his daughter. Not because I want him back, I don't, but because Isabel deserves the truth about her father, whatever that truth may be." Catherine's voice was firm. "If you want a relationship with your granddaughter, I need you to help me find Michael." James's expression darkened. "Finding him won't be difficult. Convincing him to take responsibility might be. I'm not asking you to force him. I just want him to acknowledge her existence even if he chooses to remain uninvolved." Catherine paused, then added, "And I want this resolved before we decide anything about your role in Isabel's life." As their dinner concluded, neither could have predicted how their lives would intertwine in the coming days, or how the search for Michael would uncover secrets that had remained buried for years, secrets that would challenge everything Catherine thought she knew about the father of her child and the powerful family she was now connected to. The digital marketing summit passed in a haze for Catherine. She delivered her presentation on autopilot, her mind constantly returning to her dinner with James and the implications of their agreement. By the final day of the conference, she was both physically and emotionally exhausted. When she returned to her hotel room after the closing session, Catherine found an envelope that had been slipped under her door. Inside was a business card with James's private number and a handwritten note. "I've located Michael. Call me when you're ready to discuss next steps." Her hands trembled as she dialed the number. James answered immediately. "That was fast," Catherine remarked, sinking onto the edge of the bed. "I have resources," James replied matter-of-factly. "Michael is indeed in Seattle working for a small tech startup. He's been there for about 5 months." Did you contact him? Catherine asked, heart racing. Not yet. I thought we should discuss our approach first. I'm flying back to Boston tomorrow. If you're on the same flight, we could continue this conversation in person. The next afternoon found them seated side by side once again, this time in first class. James had arranged an upgrade for Catherine despite her protests. I think I should speak to him first, James said once they were airborne. He might be more receptive if the initial contact comes from me. Catherine nodded slowly. What will you tell him? The truth, that I met you by chance, discovered I have a granddaughter, and that it's time for him to face his responsibilities. James's expression hardened. I won't pressure him to be involved if he truly doesn't want to be, but he needs to at least acknowledge Isabel legally. I'm not after his money, Catherine said quickly. This isn't just about money, James replied. It's about Isabel's right to know her father and her heritage. Whatever Michael decides about his level of involvement, he needs to recognize her as his daughter officially. 3 days later, Catherine received a text from James. Michael has agreed to a video call tomorrow at 7 p.m. Are you comfortable doing this at my home? I can send a car. Catherine spent the next day in a state of nervous anticipation. Rebecca came over to wish her luck and to watch Isabel during the call. You're sure you want to do this? Rebecca asked, bouncing Isabel on her hip. You don't owe Michael anything. This isn't for Michael, Catherine replied, kissing her daughter's chubby cheek. It's for Isabel. She deserves to have the option of knowing her father, even if he chooses not to be involved. James's home turned out to be a stunning penthouse apartment overlooking Boston Harbor. Catherine tried not to gape at the obvious wealth, as a housekeeper led her to a comfortable study where James was waiting. Catherine, he greeted her, his expression serious. Michael is expecting our call in 10 minutes. Before we connect, there's something you should know, she tensed. What is it? Michael wasn't entirely forthcoming about his reasons for leaving you, James said carefully. He told me he left because he wasn't ready for fatherhood, which I'm sure is partially true. But there's more to the story, Catherine frowned. What do you mean? The timing of his departure coincides with something significant that happened in our family, James explained, gesturing for her to sit. Around the time he left you, his mother was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's. The revelation hit Catherine like a physical blow. What? He never said anything about that. Vivian's condition deteriorated rapidly, James continued. It was a difficult time for everyone. Michael has never handled emotional challenges well, and I believe the combination of impending fatherhood and his mother's diagnosis was simply too much for him. Catherine struggled to process this new information. That doesn't excuse his abandonment, but it contextualizes it, I suppose. I agree, James said. It explains his actions without justifying them. He glanced at his watch. It's time. Are you ready? With a deep breath, Catherine nodded, and James initiated the video call. After a moment of connection issues, Michael's face appeared on the large screen mounted on the wall. Catherine's heart clenched at the sight of him. He looked older somehow, though it had been less than a year since she'd last seen him. His dark hair was longer, and he had grown a beard that partially obscured his jaw, but those piercing blue eyes, Isabel's eyes, were unmistakable. Dad, Michael acknowledged stiffly. Then his gaze shifted to Catherine. His expression registered shock, quickly masked by a careful neutrality. Catherine, this is unexpected. Hello, Michael, she replied, finding her voice steadier than she'd anticipated. I'll get straight to the point, James interjected. Catherine and I met by chance on a flight to Chicago. I saw a photo of her daughter, your daughter, Michael, a child you never bothered to tell us about. Michael's jaw tightened. It's complicated. Uncomplicate it, James demanded. You walked out on a pregnant woman and have made no attempt to contact her or support your child for over a year. I wasn't ready, Michael said defensively, and with Mom's condition, I couldn't handle everything at once. So you handled nothing instead? Catherine asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. You disappeared without a word about your mother's illness. I would have understood, Michael. We could have worked through it together. Michael looked away from the camera. I panicked. By the time I realized what a mistake I'd made, it felt too late to come back. It's not too late for Isabel, James said firmly. She's 6 months old. You have a lifetime to be her father if you choose to step up. And if I don't? Michael challenged, a flash of the stubborn arrogance Catherine remembered all too well crossing his face. Then you sign the acknowledgement of paternity paperwork so that Isabel's legal status is clear, and you move on with your life, Catherine stated coldly. This isn't about forcing you to be a father, Michael. It's about doing what's right for Isabel. A tense silence followed. Finally, Michael sighed heavily. I'll sign whatever needs to be signed, but I'm not ready to be a father. I don't know if I'll ever be. That's your decision, Catherine said, fighting to keep her composure. But I want you to see her just once, to know who she is. Before Michael could object, Catherine held up her phone, showing a recent photo of Isabel laughing in her high chair, blue eyes sparkling. Michael's expression changed subtly as he stared at the image. Something like wonder flickered across his features before he quickly masked it. She has your eyes, Catherine said softly. The Bennett eyes, James corrected, his voice gentler now. My mother's eyes. Michael nodded almost imperceptibly. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the paperwork, he said, his voice strained. I should go. One more thing, James said, before Michael could disconnect. I've decided to establish a trust fund for Isabel. As my granddaughter, she's entitled to certain provisions regardless of your involvement. This announcement visibly startled both Michael and Catherine. I don't want your money, Catherine began, but James held up a hand. This isn't about you or what you want. This is about Isabel's future, he said firmly. The trust will cover her education and healthcare needs. It's non-negotiable. Michael's expression darkened. Always making unilateral decisions, aren't you, Dad? Someone has to think about the future of this family, James replied evenly. The tension between father and son was palpable, even through the screen. Catherine sensed years of unresolved conflict beneath their exchange. After Michael disconnected, Catherine turned to James. You didn't need to do that, the trust fund. Yes, I did, James replied simply. She's my granddaughter. As Catherine gathered her things to leave, her phone rang. It was Rebecca, her voice urgent. Kate, you need to come home right away. Isabel's running a high fever. I've called her pediatrician, but they want us to take her to the emergency room as a precaution. Catherine's world narrowed to a pinpoint of fear. I'm on my way. James, noting her sudden pallor, asked what was wrong. When Catherine explained, he immediately took charge. My driver will get you there faster than a taxi. I'm coming with you. Too worried to argue, Catherine accepted his help. During the tense car ride, James made several calls, and by the time they arrived at the hospital, a pediatric specialist was waiting for them, apparently an old friend of James's who had agreed to see Isabel immediately. Hours later, after numerous tests and a terrifying wait, the diagnosis came, a severe ear infection that had spiked Isabel's fever dramatically. With proper antibiotics, she would recover fully. As Catherine sat beside Isabel's hospital crib, gently stroking her sleeping daughter's hair, she looked up to see James standing in the doorway, concern etched on his face. Thank you, she said sincerely. Your connections got her seen immediately. That made all the difference. James stepped into the room, his gaze fixed on his sleeping granddaughter. Family takes care of family, he said simply. The words hung in the air between them, laden with meaning. In the span of a week, their lives had become inextricably linked, not just through Isabel, but through a growing connection neither had anticipated. As dawn broke outside the hospital window, neither Catherine nor James could have predicted the shocking revelation that awaited them. One that would challenge everything they thought they knew about Michael and forever alter the course of their newly forming family. The following weeks established a new rhythm in Catherine's life. Isabel recovered quickly from her ear infection, and Catherine found herself gradually accepting James's presence in their lives. What had begun as a shocking encounter on a plane was evolving into something unexpected, a support system she had never anticipated. James proved himself not through grand gestures, but through consistency. He visited twice a week, always calling ahead and respecting Catherine's boundaries. He seemed genuinely delighted by every small development in Isabel's life, from her first successful crawl across the living room floor to her newfound fascination with Catherine's collection of colorful scarves. 1 month after their fateful meeting, Catherine received a thick envelope containing the signed paternity acknowledgement from Michael, along with a brief note. I've done as requested. The legal documents are enclosed. I'm not ready for more than this right now. At least he followed through, James commented, when Catherine showed him the paperwork during his next visit. They were sitting in her modest apartment, watching Isabel play with a set of wooden blocks James had brought her. "It's something," Catherine agreed, though she couldn't help feeling a pang of sadness for her daughter. "Have you spoken to him since our call?" James's expression tightened slightly. "Briefly. He's still processing everything. Michael has never been good at facing difficult emotions." "Like father, like son?" Catherine asked, raising an eyebrow. James chuckled ruefully. "Perhaps, though I like to think I've improved with age." He hesitated before continuing. "Speaking of improvement, I have a proposition for you." Catherine tensed. Despite their developing relationship, she remained cautious about James's wealth and influence. "What kind of proposition?" "The marketing director position you applied for at Meridian," James began. "The hiring committee was impressed by your application, independent of our connection. They've asked to interview you next week." Catherine frowned. "James, I don't want special treatment." "And you're not getting any," he assured her. "I recused myself from the hiring process entirely once I realized the connection. This is based solely on your qualifications." After careful consideration, Catherine agreed to the interview. To her surprise, the process was rigorous and professional, with no hint of favoritism. When she received the job offer 3 days later, the compensation package and healthcare benefits exceeded her expectations. "I start in 2 weeks," she told James over dinner at her apartment that Friday. She had begun cooking for him occasionally, simple meals shared after Isabel was asleep. It had become an unexpected tradition, these quiet evenings of conversation. "Congratulations," James said, raising his wine glass in a toast. "Meridian is lucky to have you." "Thank you," Catherine replied sincerely. "For everything. Not just the job opportunity, but for being here for Isabel, for being patient with my caution." James set down his glass, his expression serious. "Catherine, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have mentioned sooner, but I wanted to be certain first." The gravity in his tone alarmed her. "What is it?" "It's about Vivian, Michael's mother," James began carefully. "Her Alzheimer's diagnosis. It's complicated our family in ways beyond Michael's departure." "I don't understand," Catherine said, watching him closely. James took a deep breath. 2 months ago, during a moment of clarity, Vivian told me something disturbing. She claimed that Michael isn't my biological son." Catherine stared at him, stunned. "What?" "According to Vivian, she had a brief affair early in our marriage. The timing coincided with Michael's conception." James's voice was steady, but pain flickered in his eyes. "I didn't want to believe it, but I had DNA testing done. The results confirmed it last week. Michael and I are not biologically related." "Does Michael know?" Catherine asked, struggling to process this revelation. "Not yet. I've been trying to find the right time to tell him, especially with all that's happened recently." James ran a hand through his silver-streaked hair. "The irony isn't lost on me. I discovered I have a granddaughter at the same time I learned I don't have a son." "But you raised him," Catherine pointed out. "Biology aside, you're still his father in every way that matters." James nodded slowly. "Yes, I am, which is why this changes nothing about my commitment to Isabel. Or to you," he added quietly. Their eyes met across the table, and Catherine felt a shift in the air between them, a deepening of the connection that had been gradually forming. The moment was interrupted by Catherine's phone ringing. She glanced at the screen, surprised to see Michael's name. He had not contacted her since sending the signed paperwork. "Michael," she answered, exchanging a puzzled look with James. "Catherine." Michael's voice sounded strained. I need to talk to you. In person. Is my father there?" "Yes, he's here. Michael, what's going on?" "I'm in Boston. I've been doing a lot of thinking since our call. About Isabel. About everything." There was a pause. "Can I come over? There's something I need to say to both of you." After a moment's hesitation, Catherine agreed. 30 minutes later, there was a knock at her door. When she opened it, she barely recognized the man standing before her. Michael looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes, and an uncharacteristic nervousness in his demeanor. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. Michael entered slowly, his gaze immediately finding James, who had risen from his seat at the dining table. "Dad," Michael acknowledged, then looked around the apartment. Is she here? Isabel?" "She's asleep," Catherine replied cautiously. "It's past her bedtime." Michael nodded, seeming unsure how to proceed. Finally, he took a deep breath. I've been doing a lot of soul-searching since our video call. Seeing Isabel even just in a photo, it affected me more than I expected. Why are you here, Michael? James asked directly. I visited Mom last week, Michael replied, his voice unsteady. She was having a good day, lucid, remembering things. She recognized me immediately, asked about my life in Seattle. He swallowed hard. Then she asked if I'd met my daughter yet. Said she'd been dreaming about a baby with Bennett eyes. Catherine and James exchanged a quick glance. I told her I hadn't, Michael continued. And do you know what she said? She said, don't make your father's mistake. Don't wait until it's too late to be part of your child's life. He looked directly at James. What did she mean by that? The room fell silent. James closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with resolve. There's something I need to tell you, Michael, something I just learned myself. Over the next half hour, James explained the truth about Michael's paternity. Catherine watched as Michael's expressions cycled through shock, disbelief, anger, and finally, a strange calm. So that's why you always seemed disappointed in me, Michael said when James finished. On some level you must have suspected. No, James replied firmly. I never suspected, and I was never disappointed in you because of who you were, only because of the choices you made. You're my son, Michael. DNA doesn't change that, but I'm not a Bennett, Michael said, his voice hollow. You are in every way that matters, James insisted. You have my mother's eyes, the Bennett eyes. How that happened biologically, I don't know and don't care. What matters is that you're my son, and Isabel is my granddaughter. A soft cry came through the baby monitor on the coffee table. Catherine rose, but Michael stopped her with a gesture. May I? He asked hesitantly. I'd like to meet her. Properly. After a moment's consideration, Catherine nodded. She might be startled by a stranger, but you can try. Michael followed Catherine to the nursery, where Isabel was standing in her crib, whimpering softly. When she saw Catherine, she reached out her arms, but her gaze quickly shifted to Michael, curiosity replacing distress. Hello, Isabel, Michael said softly, his voice catching. I'm your dad. Isabel studied him with solemn blue eyes, those Bennett eyes that had sparked this entire journey. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled, revealing two tiny bottom teeth. Catherine watched as something changed in Michael's expression, a softening, a recognition. He reached out tentatively and Isabel grasped his finger with surprising strength. She has a good grip, he remarked, wonder in his voice. She's strong, Catherine replied. She takes after her grandmother, I think. When they returned to the living room, James was standing by the window looking out at the night sky. He turned as they entered, his expression unreadable, until he saw Michael carrying Isabel carefully in his arms. She's remarkable, Michael said, looking down at his daughter. I've missed so much already. But not everything, James responded. There's still time. The three adults sat together, Isabel contentedly exploring Michael's watch from her perch on his lap. The conversation that followed was difficult but necessary. Boundaries were established, expectations clarified, and tentative plans made for the future. I'm not asking to disrupt the life you've built, Michael told Catherine, but I'd like to be part of Isabel's life if you'll allow it. I know I have to earn that right. Yes, you do, Catherine agreed, but everyone deserves a second chance, especially Isabel. She deserves the chance to know her father. 6 months later, Catherine stood in the garden of James's country house, watching as Isabel, now a toddling 1-year-old, played in the grass with both her father and grandfather. Michael had relocated to Boston, taking a position at a local tech firm. He was proving himself as a father, not perfect but present and committed. James approached Catherine, handing her a glass of lemonade. Penny for your thoughts? She smiled, accepting the drink. Just thinking about how much has changed since that flight to Chicago. If I hadn't dropped that photo. Some things are meant to be, James replied, his hand briefly touching hers, a gesture that had become increasingly common between them. Their relationship had evolved gradually from reluctant connection to friendship, to something neither had anticipated, but both welcomed. Do you believe that? Catherine asked. That things happen for a reason. James considered the question, watching Michael push Isabel on a small swing. I believe we make meaning from the circumstances we're given. A year ago, I thought I knew exactly who my family was. Now, he gestured to the scene before them. Now I have a granddaughter I adore, a son who's finding his way back, and you. And me, Catherine echoed softly, allowing her fingers to intertwine with his. As the summer afternoon stretched into evening, the newly formed family gathered around the patio table for dinner. Looking around at these people who had entered her life through chance and circumstance, Catherine felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced since before Isabel was born. Family wasn't always what you expected or planned for. Sometimes it came together in the most unexpected ways, through dropped photographs, chance encounters, and the courage to face difficult truths. What mattered wasn't the path that brought them together, but the choice they each made to stay, to work through the complications, and to build something meaningful from the unexpected connections that life presented. As Isabel laughed, reaching for both her father and grandfather with equal delight, Catherine knew that their story was just beginning. And for the first time in a very long time, she was genuinely looking forward to the next chapter.